Megan teaches high school. Now, Megan, stand still just a minute, all right? How many of you guys had a high school teacher this pretty? Just let me know. Any hands? No, I didn't either. All right, so I would have worked harder. You know, I was just thinking how blessed I really am. I have 3 baby girls right now here at church, and every one of them has always become, are we getting a boy with the birds? We're getting a baby boy bird. Okay, so very good. But they always become my grandchildren. You know, I'm always like a grandpa. I love them so much. So now think back 31 years. I can remember 31 years ago carrying some of them around as well, and now they are successful adults doing well, and it's just amazing. So I love these kids. Thanks for sharing them with us. It's wonderful. All right. Today I want to continue on in the series on faith. Today it's faith warning. I want to talk about Moses. Moses. I'm going to go into that just a little bit here in a minute. You ever find that wasn't really ready for that? You may have said, well, I didn't see that coming. Didn't see, anyone ever said that? I didn't see that coming. Or, wow, I was really blindsided by that. That's not exactly what I was expecting. Has anyone else ever used that? That's not exactly what I was expecting. Well, I was caught a little off guard with that one. How about, who would have thought it? Who would have thought that, you know? All of those make sense to me. So we get out of high school, we're ready, we're prepared, we're going to jump into life. At least that's what we think. We're going to hit the ground running. Just to find out that we're not really ready. There are many times in life when we think we are prepared, but we really are not. Now, I've heard many say they got out of high school, going to take a year off before I go back to school, and then they say, man, I wasn't ready for education. Now I find out I wasn't ready not to get it. Yeah, so sometimes we do that. How about jumping into that new job? Really wasn't ready for how that was going to go and what was expected there. Marriage. How many of you really jumped into marriage ready for what was going to happen? I mean, Deb was really fortunate to get me, but I see what some of you ladies got. So sometimes we're not really ready for that. Oh, I love this one. I don't care how old you were when you had your kids. Who's ready for that? There is no way to be ready for that. And then whenever I asked the doctor for the book of instructions, he thought I was nuts. There's got to be a plan on how to raise these children. And now I read the other day, which I thought was pretty amusing. And then I thought, no, that's you. How many people are not ready for retirement? I'm 67 years old. Someone asked me when I was going to retire. I said, when am I going to die? Because it looks like that's my retirement date. And Mikey thought he was going to get a takeover here in another year or so. But of course, that may be bad for my health. I'm not for sure. Not really ready. Moses is going to be a perfect example. This happens in our spiritual life as well. Many times, a person becomes a new Christian and they think they're just ready to take on the world. Well, you're not. You're not. Moses felt like he was ready to take on the world. We're going to look at growing our faith, and growing our faith is not always easy. And I've selected Moses. I love Moses. He's one of my favorite. He's easy to associate with. We're going to go to the book of Acts, though. We're going to use Stephen's sermon in the book of Acts to address this. Stephen's standing before the Sanhedrin. You know they're going to stone him to death here before long. He's standing before the Sanhedrin giving his argument. And he starts in the Old Testament and starts bringing them up to date to Christ. And then we get to verse 20 of chapter 7 of the book of Acts. In verse 20, chapter 7, it says, at that time Moses was born. And he just got through talking about the treachery that the Israelites were suffering in Egypt. He said, at that time Moses was born. He was no ordinary child. For 3 months he was cared for in his father's house. When he was placed outside, Pharaoh's daughter took him and brought him up as her own son. Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action. Powerful in speech and action. He was educated in all the wisdom of Egypt. Now, I'm sure I'm not the only one that watches the History Channel. You ever watch the History Channel on some of that stuff of ancient Egypt? Those people were smart. They were really smart. The things that they were able to do so many years in the past, I have to buy into that ancient alien theory personally. I don't know how they were smart enough without all those aliens helping out. But, oh man, figuring out how to put those stones on top of each other and all that would go with it. I realize it's slave labor, but let me tell you, that was amazing. Moses was educated in all of the things of Egypt. Now Egypt, they're just wonderful. You can read about it too. You don't just have to watch the History Channel. They were smart people with their buildings, with pyramids. That was amazing. With their agriculture plan. You know, they had terracing early on. It's amazing what you could find there. With their arts and designs. Even in their things of our body, embalming. Anyone ever gone to a museum and seen a mummy from Egypt? Man, you know, I've got family that don't look that well. So think about it. They're pretty skilled, pretty skilled. And Moses was brought up in all that education. Now here's something pretty interesting as well. It says he was powerful in speech and in action. Does anyone remember the argument that Moses made whenever God says, I want to send you? He goes, I can't speak very well. I'm not eloquent. I can't speak very well. But here we find out he was well educated and he could speak very, very well. That's the first 20 years of his life. The first 20 years. He's living well. Moses had it all. There was education, leadership, and great wealth. He had it all. Now the second 40 years, that was the first 40 years. Most of you are not going to have 3 40s. So you can break this down into 20s if you like, okay? But his first 40 years, that accounts for that. Let's go to chapter 7 again, verse 23 and through 29. When Moses was 40 years old, he decided to visit his fellow Israelites. He saw one of them being mistreated by an Egyptian. So he went to his defense and avenged him by killing the Egyptian. Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them. But they did not. The next day, Moses came upon 2 Israelites who were fighting. He tried to reconcile them by saying, Men, you're brothers. Why do you want to hurt each other? But the man who was mistreating the other pushed Moses aside and said, Who made you ruler and judge over us? Do you want to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday? When Moses heard this, he fled to Midian, where he settled as a foreigner and had 2 sons. That's the second 40 years. Now the second 40 years, I've called that a life of change. A life of change. The first one was a life of Pharaoh. That one's a life of change. Moses found out that having all that the world has to offer is not always satisfying. He's come to the age where he realized there has to be more in life. Now, how it took place, we're not really aware, but I want you to think about the fact that there was always someone reminding him of where he come from. I'm convinced of that. Someone in Pharaoh's palace said, yeah, you're adopted. Yeah, you wouldn't be living with us if it hadn't been. And they're always holding it to him. So I think he must have had an inquiring mind wants to know attitude. So he started learning about the Israelites. And somehow he has convinced himself, I don't know how that took place, I can't account for that, that God was going to use him to rescue his people. Maybe it was only logic. I'm the one who has Pharaoh's ear. Maybe I'm the one who's going to rescue the people. But he found out that those early years of the wealth and the education and the leadership, that that wasn't always satisfying. So Moses identified the fact that he had a purpose in life to rescue the Israelites. But it was a purpose without a plan. In verse 25, he thought that the people, the Israelites, would realize that God was using him for this. But he found out that wasn't the case at all. Instead, they start questioning, who are you? That's not how he thought things was going to work out. So when it didn't work out that way, in verse 29, Moses fled to Midian. Now, this change has not been good for him. He's given up his life of worldly plenty. The world has blessed him living in the house of Pharaoh. He's given that up, but now even worse, he's given up on the plan that God had for him. He was convinced that God had a purpose for him. That's why he confronted the Israelites. But now he's given up on that plan as well. That's not for me. In chapter 7, verse 30, and following will be the third 40 years. After 40 years, an angel appeared to Moses in the flames of a burning bush. Now that ought to get your attention right there. In the desert near Mount Sinai. When he saw this, he was amazed at the sight. As he went over to look more closely, he heard the Lord's voice. I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses trembled with fear. Now, you may say, well, look, he's a shepherd. He's been out there in the desert. He's a tough guy. You start hearing voices from a burning bush and tell me you won't tremble. All right? So he's trembling with fear and did not dare look. Then the Lord said to him, take off your sandals and the place where you are standing is holy ground. I have indeed seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their groaning. Now this is 40 years later, folks. Moses realized it 40 years ago. But the time wasn't when God wanted him to do it. God was just preparing him. I have heard the groaning and have come down to set them free. Now come, I will send you back to Egypt. This is the same Moses whom they had rejected with the words, who made you ruler and judge? He was sent to be their ruler and deliverer by God himself through the angel who appeared to him in the bush. He led them out of Egypt and did wonders and miraculous signs in Egypt, at the Red Sea, and for 40 years in the desert. This is the Moses who told the Israelites, God will send you a prophet like me from your own people. And we'll stop there. The third 40 years. That's a life of commitment. Moses, I am convinced, had settled not to accomplish anything major. He wasn't going to make any more effort. He wasn't going to rock the boat. He was going to tend his sheep. His father-in-law's sheep, by the way. And he was just going to coast on out of life. But God had a purpose, this time with a plan for Moses. And Moses had not fulfilled that. So Moses still has to make the final decision. God's not taking that privilege away from him. Just because he scared him to death talking to him through a burning bush doesn't mean he has to do what he's asked him to do. But he did. He became a reluctant leader. And Moses warned Pharaoh, and he warned the Israelites of what was to happen. Today I want to take those three things and bring that to you and how that applies to you. Moses, the life lessons that he has given for a Christian. The first one is warning. Oh, whenever I hear warning, I always think, I want to show you how old I am. Anyone else remember Lost in Space? All right, thank you. And you got that silly robot, I've used this before, you got that silly robot swinging his arms. Warning, Will Robinson, isn't that who it was? Man, I can't believe I watched that goofy show. But anyway, well, the worst of it is I liked it. Warning, congregation. The life of Pharaoh, your line is not what it seems. Now, I don't want to pick on education. Education is certainly a wonderful thing. I don't believe, parents, that we often give enough attention to sending our kids off to be educated. I can remember a lot of kids that I was in school with who were wonderful Christian kids, went off to secular colleges, got educated with various types of philosophy, and lost their faith. Most of you can think of ones that you know as well. But education's a wonderful thing. Education gives us the knowledge and the ability to help us accomplish and get the most out of life. Now here, don't buy in to the philosophy of the false gods that education brings you. Money, things, fame. They don't all equal happiness and purpose. Who knows that better than Moses? Moses, a prince of Egypt. Wealth, fame, education, smarter than the average bear. Yeah. He had it all. You can't buy into that. Education's a wonderful thing. And it will get you to places in life you cannot go without it. But don't let it ruin your faith. Moses is a good example. He didn't let it ruin his faith. He realized that God had more for him. Education does not guarantee happiness. You know, being rich and famous has issues. Just like being poor and unknown has issues. I'm really familiar with the poor and unknown issues a lot more than I am the rich and famous. But 2 or 3 of you who are rich and famous told me, oh, we have issues too. So, yeah. So the very first thing I want to caution you about, I want to give you the warning that Moses sent to us. Life in this world is deceiving. And it may look like you've got the world by the tail. And when you're young, that really looks good. But change will come. Change will come. Warning, life a-changing. That's challenging. Almost everyone comes to some point when they search for the meaning of life. What is the true meaning of life? Those carefree days of youth, they're over. They're gone. Now, most of us squandered our youth. Don't you wish you could do the things that you did when you were 25? And me too, Aunt Lois. Man, when I was 25, every joint in my body worked. Now we're down to part of them. And I have to talk those parts into doing what they're supposed to. I got good news the other day. I was very happy when I saw the heart doctor. So he had told me I'd never have surgery again. And all I could think is, I'm going to be walking stiff-legged because we're going to have to lock this one because the knee was so bad. He said I could have surgery, so I called my knee doctor, and I'm going to be able to have a knee replacement. So I'm really excited about that. But here's the kicker. I ran miles and miles and miles to stay in good health. And he said, you know, if you hadn't run so much, those joints would be a lot better. Thank you. I really needed to hear this. Yeah. So we realize that those days of youth, sometimes we just squandered them. Sometimes we're so busy wanting to be growing up that we don't enjoy them on the way through. That's why old men buy hot rods and motorcycles, because they missed it on the way through. I didn't miss it. We did it on the way through too. But it can be challenging. We want more in our life than just that attitude of, I need to make money. And many times, change does not come easy. I've told you, change in life is not good for, I just don't change well. I don't age well. I like the 60s. Every once in a while I pray, Lord, if it could just be 1968 again, but it just hasn't happened. Most of us have those days. 68, I was 16 years old driving a Camaro. I was a happy camper. Yeah. My teachers did not look like that. So it was a great joy just to be able to aggravate the ones I had. So I really got the most out of those years. I miss those. There's times I'm thinking, where did they go? Change isn't easy. We all know that. But as we start getting to that certain age, we start making those changes. Changes take place for people at different ages. I quit playing ball whenever my kids were old enough to start swinging a bat, where I could be there as a dad instead of as a player on another field. That's just what I did. It's what I chose to do. It's very important that we realize change doesn't come easy. But it's very important, just like with Moses, change will come. Now here's the kicker. Everyone get this one. Just because life starts to change doesn't mean you can run away and hide. That's what Moses tried to do. Moses tried to run away and hide. He went to Midian, just kind of found a wife, had a couple sons. My father-in-law's got sheep. I'll raise the sheep. I don't have to stay at home all the time. I'll go out with the sheep. He just kind of found a life of, I'll get by. Just because change is taking place in your life, don't hang up your life. Don't quit living. And sometimes we do that. Sometimes we decide that, nope, I want to just slide on out. And that's what Moses had planned to do. So the first one was a warning, don't buy into the program of the world. The second one is a warning, don't buy into the fact that change is bad and that I got to go hide somewhere. Because change isn't bad. It's a part of life. And as a part of life, we adjust to it. And if we adjust to it well, you're going to get a whole lot out of that second phase of life. But if you don't, you're going to be like Moses. You're going to be hiding from God. Do you think Moses was hiding from Pharaoh? I don't believe that for an instant. He was hiding from God. I believe he probably misunderstood what God had wanted him to do in going and rescuing the Israelite people. But he took off and ran away and hid. Now, you may not go somewhere away to hide, but some people just hide right in their own living room. Couch potatoes. Yeah. They just pile up on the couch, get home from work, sit down, get lost in what's going on. Quit looking at each other. It makes me feel bad. Change. Don't be afraid of it. Embrace it. And finally, the third warning that he would give, of course, now you got to remember, Moses is the one who told Pharaoh, there's going to be some changes around here, and Pharaoh said, oh no, there's not. Where's Pharaoh today? We don't know his name, but we know Moses. There was change that was going to take place. Israelite people weren't too excited about the change once they got out there in the desert. You brought us out here to starve to death? We had plenty of food in Egypt. They were starving to death in Egypt. And they'd forgotten that. The third one is warning. Life of commitment is very demanding. Moses could not have had any idea what he was signing up for. Little did he know. Remember, he kept using those arguments. I can't speak. I'm not eloquent of speech. I can't do that, God. Please send somebody else. I've had all the change in life I want. Send somebody else. Well, God looked around and said, no, but it's still you, Moses. And he sent Moses. And whenever Moses went, he finally said, can you send Aaron? Let Aaron do the talking. Now remember, it said Moses was good at speech, but he became the man of action. He's the one who threw the staff down. Aaron's warning, he's the mouthpiece. But God is using them. But it was a life of commitment. I don't know how you feel about that, but I can't hardly imagine walking into Pharaoh's court and saying, let my people go. And he's looking at it and go, well, where's your army? Who's put you in charge here? And then, I don't know how Moses did it, and I'm just going to give you my words. The God of my father, the God of Jacob and Joseph, whom you've forgotten. He has sent me here. And Pharaoh was going, we have our own gods, thank you. And Moses said, okay, thank you. And he left. That's not what happened. He just brought all sorts of plagues every time he wouldn't listen. It was very demanding. I don't think it was easy. Moses could not have had any idea, and folks, you have no idea how God's going to use you. But if you're way hiding in Midian, He can't. He's calling you back. Not everyone will listen and change whenever you have decided to follow God and you've made your commitment, and you think, well, I will tell people about this. Not everyone's going to listen. I've been trying to tell people for 48 years we should have the largest church in the world by now. Not everyone's going to listen. And some of the ones who listen don't even change. Moses had Pharaoh and the Israelites. Pharaoh never did listen, and the Israelites were slow. Victory, whenever you make that commitment and it's demanding, victory can feel like defeat or punishment. Here Moses is doing a wonderful, great thing, and the people are grumbling against him. Grumble, grumble, grumble. So Moses knew what was taking place. There had to be times that he felt defeated. He left Midian, where he at least had a mud hut, for a tent for 40 years. And wandering in the wilderness. And there'd be times that God would say, pull up stake, we're moving on. And they had to do that. And he had to think, man, those sheep weren't as much work as these Israelites. There had to be those occasions. So there had to be time when victory felt like defeat. And there's those times as a Christian, because I'm talking to you about your spiritual life, there's those times as a Christian that you may not experience earthly blessings. There may be those times whenever you think, man, everyone around me is being blessed and no one in this neighborhood goes to church but me. And you feel like everyone else is being blessed but you. That there is no earthly promised land. Now, do you remember what happened with Moses? He got to the place where he could see it, but he didn't get to enter in. Joshua would lead the people in, and all those people that were older than Joshua would be spared, but all those others were not. They would die in the wilderness because they had doubted God. And Moses is out here in the wilderness, and he's going to die in the wilderness. So sometimes in our spiritual walk, we just think that there is no earthly promised land, that it doesn't get any better. And some of you who have struggled with your Christianity, I struggle with my Christianity. I've never lied to you about that. I have to work at it every day. I'd like to tell you that prayer really comes easy. The first 30 seconds comes easy. After that, I work at it. It doesn't come easy. Sometimes there's no promised land. Let's bring this to a conclusion. Preparing for my forever. I want you to go over to Matthew. This is my favorite Moses scripture. Chapter 17. Moses' favorite scripture for Moses. Chapter 17 and verse 3. This is the Mount of Transfiguration. Verse 2, it says, then he was transfigured before them, that's Jesus. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as lightning. Just then, there appeared before them Moses and Elijah, talking with Jesus. You can't tell me Moses didn't enter. He entered the promised land that was far greater than anyone else knew. That journey in the wilderness, it didn't rock his boat. There had to be those days he was so frustrated and so aggravated and just wanted to kick a rock. Oh, he did. And he didn't enter into the promised land on earth. But he had the distinction, years and years and years and years and years later, to meeting on a mountaintop with Jesus. Folks, I'm looking forward to my mountaintop meeting with Jesus. And I know some of you are as well. This world is not my home. There's something better coming. This world will not give me the promised land that I've looked for. There's something better coming. This world will not give me the contentment that I'd like to have. There's something better coming. This world will not give me the happiness that I long for. But there's something better coming. This world may not even treat me good, but there's something better coming. There's a mountaintop with Jesus. Now the question, have you learned from Moses today? This world will deceive you. You cannot run away and hide. You may think that there is no reward here, but there's something better coming. Something better coming. Don't lose sight. Here's the thing about Moses. I can't help but think that as he stood on the mountain and looked across the Jordan into the promised land that Joshua would lead them into, I'm thinking, are you ready? I made it. I made it. He didn't have to enter. He saw it fulfilled here on earth. I see it fulfilled every time the invitation is offered. I see that promised land that I long for here on earth because of you, my congregation. There's a love affair that exists with most of us. I see it. I see it with the babies that are born. I see that hope that only God can give us. But I also see that someday there'll be a mountaintop. And it'll be Mike and Jesus. Not Moses and Jesus, it'll be Mike and Jesus. And he'll say, behold, the promised land. Will you please stand as with the invitation?